So I had a poll on my community tab on different versus matches between characters from Fortnite's and Seven Deadly Sins against JJK characters, and the one that won at the end was, to me no surprise, Sukuna versus Bond. And in all honesty, I like both of these characters. I like what Sukuna's doing in the manga right now. He has some really cool abilities, and Bond is one of my all-time favorite characters in Seven Deadly Sins and in anime in general. So a matchup between these two characters just seems like a hell of a lot of fun for me to do. Now obviously I am going to have to be fair with these two characters based on their own abilities and combat ability. Now I'm still fairly new to power scaling, so please go easy on me, as I am just going with what I've seen from the anime and manga for both series, as well as the types of hacks that both characters do in fact have. That in this, like many other power scaling videos should be, is for fun, so don't take what I say too seriously and just sit back and have a good time. I know I shouldn't have to say this, but many people take things way too seriously when it comes to versus videos or comparing different series, and it ends up being incredibly toxic. So without further ado, let's get into how Bond completely destroys Sukuna. So spoilers for Seven Deadly Sins, Fortnite's The Apocalypse, and JJK up to this point, so you've been warned. Now, to make things completely clear, I will be using Bond at his current state in the Fortnite's The Apocalypse manga, which is more or less around the same level he was at the end of Seven Deadly Sins, and Sukuna from the end of his battle with Gojo. However, at full health with all the abilities he has up and towards the conclusion of that fight. I will not be using current manga Sukuna in his battle right now with Yuta and Yuji, as those fights have not ended, and there's still a possibility we'll see more from Sukuna moving forward. It does speculate that version of Sukuna at full health would be a lot stronger than the Sukuna that Gojo ended up fighting. Not fully clear, so just want to go with the Megami Sukuna thing that we had right now. So let's get things started with Sukuna and his abilities. So Sukuna, as he's possessing Megami's bodies, has a variety of different abilities, with Sukuna's main innate techniques being Cleave and Dismantle. Starting off, we have Dismantle, which is a ranged slash attack that Sukuna uses primarily to slash through inanimate objects. It can also be used against cursed spirits and sorcerers to great effectiveness. However, it is primarily used to cut cleanly through inanimate objects. Then there is, well, Cleave, an ability that is primarily used for animate objects. And now what makes Cleave such an interesting power is that it essentially adjusts itself to the toughness and cursed energy level of what it is being used against. However, unlike Dismantle, Cleave needs to make physical contact unless amplified, unless we take into account Sukuna's domain expansion, which we'll get into soon. Now, I should mention this also, but Sukuna also has this black box technique, which we still don't know the proper name of, and essentially he generates fire and made a fire arrow. He's used this twice, once to take out Jogo, the literal cursed spirit that is the embodiment of the fear of volcanoes and fire, and to finish off Maharaga in that whole battle that he had during the Shibuya incident. And to this point, we have still not seen him use it at all, as we don't know the conditions or what this technique actually is, so let's just keep it as a last resort that Sukuna uses whenever he feels like it. He might use it by the time this video comes out in the manga for all I know, and this will just be bad timing. But if I'm anything, I'm bad with timing. Moving on, we also have Sukuna's reverse curse technique, which is what a lot of high-level sorcerers do, which allows them to multiply their curse technique by itself, giving them advanced healing and regeneration, allowing Sukuna to repair his limbs back to full health, growing new limbs, etc. This will take literally a few seconds if he concentrates. And since Sukuna has such a vast understanding of cursed energy, it seems he can do it faster than anyone else that can use this technique. Sukuna is also incredibly well versed in hand-to-hand combat. We've seen this multiple times throughout the series, but this is especially true during his battle with Gojo, where the two of them constantly exchanged and blocked multiple blows with one another. Something else that was also made incredibly clear during his battle with Gojo is that he is very adept at copying techniques, more specifically how to manipulate his cursed energy in order to mimic what someone else has done by only seeing this done once. With two very notable examples. One, when Sukuna decided to turn one of his fingers and imbue with all of his cursed energy and essence so he could force feed it into Megami by only seeing Kenjaku use it when he in turn Sukuna into 20 different cursed objects with his 20 fingers. The other is when in the battle with Gojo, Sukuna ended up copying Gojo using reverse curse technique on the part of his brain in order to refurbish his technique to essentially get a fresh start. And with his very high battle IQ and understanding of cursed energy, Sukuna can most likely do this with any other utilization of cursed energy. Now for the epitome of Sukuna's techniques, which are his domain expansion. Now, as we all know, Jujutsu Kaisen, with the domain expansions, it's literally the epitome of the sorcerer and their innate techniques, being able to create a vast barrier or area where their techniques have a sure hit effect. Sukuna's domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, does not have a barrier, allowing him to expand it out to a vast degree, giving the risk of someone potentially being able to leave it, but also increasing his range, thus allowing his Cleave and Dismantle to be used consistently and continuously until everything within the domain is rendered to dust. Biggest utilization of this was when he was using it to take out Maharaga and just a huge chunk of Shibuya. And with this feat, around around this time, 15-figure Sukuna could be calculated to be around small city or large town level in terms of his overall attack potency. But now, during his battle with Gojo, it is calculated to be at least small city, if not city level at this point, which I think is very likely due to how not only did he now merge with Megumi and has access to Megumi's techniques, he also devoured the rest of his mummified body to essentially make up for the 20th finger that is currently missing in order to bring himself back to what's essentially his full power. And since we can calculate his overall attack potency to be at least small city level to regular city level, his durability should be around the same ballpark, as a lot of times powerful characters like this can take what they can dish out. The highest feat at the moment of Sukuna actually being able to tank a very large scale attack was the 2 times he was hit with Gojo's Hollow Purple, which essentially creates a giant explosion that should actually erase anything in its path, since it's in imaginary space and should not even exist. First one was a incredibly powerful Hollow Purple, which is a 200% amped one that Gojo had to start off their fight, and then the final Hollow Purple that was used towards the end of their fight. So Sukuna, with his reverse curse technique and quick thinking and utilization of his cursed energy to amplify his body, was actually able to survive both of those attacks, but was still gravely injured from both. So small city to civil level attacks can very well injure him a lot. Now let's close out Sukuna's own techniques with his domain expansion, which is Malevolent Shrine. And like many domain expansions we see throughout the series, has a sure hit factor, where any attack that Sukuna uses instantly can hit the opponent and is guaranteed to hit. And this also allows Sukuna to use both Cleave and Dismantle simultaneously, even from a range, as long as it's within his domain, and hits the opponent with a barrage of slash attacks at all angles until everything in the domain ends up being reduced to dust. Sukuna lifts the domain, or you manage to leave the domain. Or, as we saw in the battle with Gojo, you destroy the shrine at the very center of the domain. Now his domain is incredibly large, as he made it to not have a barrier, increasing the risk factor of people leaving, but also increases his sure hit factor and gives him a much larger range. As of right now, the max range of Malevolent Shrine is about 200 meters, which is a very large distance. So the domain is literally more or less an instant win condition for Sukuna in a lot of fights, unless you know Simple Domain or use your own domain to cancel it out. Now that essentially does it for Sukuna's main techniques that are only for him. But since we're using him plus Megumi, he actually has Megumi's 10 Shadows technique, and he has a variety of different abilities that are very useful in multiple situations. Let's briefly go over what each of the 10 Shadows can do. First, there's Nue, which is an owl type Shikigami that flies around at fast speeds and is able to generate electricity around its body so it can hit its opponents with electrical discharge. Next, there are the Divine Dogs, which Sukuna uses to just mainly have more range attacks, so they can attack opponents from a distance. He also has Divine Dog Totality, which is a combination of the Shadow's Divine Dogs, which have increased attack potency comparable to that of certain special grade curses. So that is also an incredibly powerful attack, and anyone that has to deal with this has to deal with Sukuna and an incredibly powerful Divine Dog. We also have Max Elephant, which is an incredibly large elephant that weighs a lot, not to mention it can be dropped on opponents within range. So if Sukuna wants to, he can just summon Max Elephant above his opponents to crush them. Max Elephant can also spurt out a large, powerful gush of water right at their opponents at point blank range if need be post summoning. There's also Rabbit Escape, pretty simple. Sukuna summons a crap ton of bunnies that end up surrounding the opponent and can be used for quick escapes. And if we take the enemy into account, these bunnies know Kung Fu, which don't really do much, I guess, but hey, it's fun and it's good for quick escapes. Or even a distraction to give the caster some time to use a new technique that requires some prep time. We also have Raging Bull, which is an ox-like creature that, when summoned, essentially charges in a straight line, and if it continually charges in a straight line without being interrupted or hitting anything, it gets stronger and stronger, making the initial impact incredibly powerful. There's also Tranquil Deer, which the main thing about Tranquil Deer is that it is utilizing reversed curse technique. It uses positive energy, allowing it to, if it remains near Sukuna, to heal Sukuna, essentially giving Sukuna a free reverse curse technique to heal him up without expending his own cursed energy as long as Tranquil Deer is around. Not to mention, with it expewing positive energy, it could also nullify curse technique attacks that are launched right at Sukuna within its general vicinity. So it essentially nullifies an attack once it's being used. But obviously if it's destroyed, the healing effect and positive energy ends up stopping. Now the second to last 10 Shadow creature I will talk about is the merged 10 Shadow Totality, which is essentially the merged beast Agito, which Sukuna used against Gojo when they were fighting. And it is a combination of the Great Serpent, Tiger Funeral, and Round Deer. Now, Great Serpent, we saw at the start of JJK, and it was destroyed by Sukuna, and based with how 10 Shadows tends to work, when a creature is destroyed, the user can end up applying those aspects to an entirely different part of the 10 Shadows, which is how he used the Serpent for this combination. Now it also has Round Deer in it, so it's able to use both Reverse Curse Technique and being able to nullify Cursed Energy attacks with positive energy, as well as Tiger Funeral, which we have not seen nor know the capabilities of. While this is also incredibly powerful, it is also entirely self-reliant, so it can end up tag teaming alongside Sukuna against whatever opponent it can be. But one good clean hit and it will be destroyed. Now finally, obviously the most hyped creature from the 10 Shadows being Mahoraga. Mahoraga has a boatload of abilities, but its main thing is that it has the capability to adapt. When it's hit by an attack for the first time, if it does not finish it, it then slowly begins to adapt towards a particular technique or method of attack, until eventually it ends up becoming completely immune when given enough time. Or if you hit it with enough of the exact same attack, it'll adapt very quickly, thus making itself immune to that particular ability. Mahoraga also has a blade on its hand that is imbued with positive energy, and if it's used against cursed spirits, it'll instantly destroy them. Mahoraga is also incredibly fast and strong and relatively durable on its own, but it can still be taken out by a stronger opponent. And the opponent, more specifically, has to either take it out before it adapts, or hit it with its very first try to destroy Mahoraga, so it doesn't have even the chance to adapt. And that's essentially it for the 10 Shadows that Sukuna is capable of utilizing. It has been theorized that Sukuna has access to Megumi's domain expansion Chimera Shadow Garden, which encloses the opponent in an area of shadow, allowing him to continuously spam multiple copies of the 10 Shadows all at once that the user has already tamed. But since he has not used it, we will not add it towards his actual confrontation. But with all that out of the way, there is one last technique that Sukuna is able to do, and that is with his cleave. And that, with the addition of Mahoraga, he was able to find a way to make his curse technique slash through space itself. And I'm not going to begin to go through the whole how things adapted to it. All you gotta know is that it targets space itself that cuts, and not curse techniques, not people, just space in general, and completely cuts through whatever is being targeted in that general vicinity of space, which is how Sukuna was able to cut through Gojo's infinity and kill him. I just realized before this section ends, I did not mention how fast Sukuna was. So Sukuna's speed has been being calculated to be at minimum subsonic plus, if not massively hypersonic. So he is one of the fastest people in the JJK verse, being roughly 25 times the speed of sound. Excuse me for the Cliff Notes version. But now, let's go into Ban, Fox Sin of Greed, and member of the 7 Deadly Sins. Now, in all honesty, Ban has a very small pool of abilities that he ends up using, and all essentially come from his innate magical ability, which is Snatch. Snatch is essentially something that allows Ban to steal things from others, either objects that are on them, like weapons, items, or even their internal organs. Snatch also allows him with Hunter Fast and Physical Hunt to essentially absorb the physical strength and even stamina of his opponents, with range being incredibly large to the point where he can absorb from either specific targets or from the general populace around him, adding on to his own strength. Right now, with how he is post 7 Deadly Sins and in 4 Nights of the Apocalypse, Ban can handle an immense amount of power, with his max pre-purgatory being around half of his opponent's overall strength when he uses Hunter Fest. But now, there is no telling how much he can in fact steal from his opponents, even though he doesn't really need to at this point steal their strength or stamina due to his overwhelming power at the end of the series. As the only real limit to this is the immense amount of fatigue that utilizing this ability has, but with how his body is now, it is very likely that he doesn't suffer much from fatigue unless battling an incredibly powerful opponent. Specific utilizations of his Snatch ability is Assault Hunt, which Ban charges forward while removing the heads of all his opponents. He also has Banishing Kill, which he pulls himself over a large distance while performing a fatal slash on his opponent. This is primarily used while he's using his nunchucks, but he can basically do this with his hands as well. There's Crazy Hunt, where he performs a Fox Hunt-like attack several times on an enemy up close, but also at a pretty good distance as well. Fox Hunt, basically the main utilization of his ability Snatch. He either uses his hands or a weapon to essentially take things from a distance, like hearts or other objects. Hunterfest, I've already explained, alongside Physical Hunt, steals people's either magical power, stamina, or with Physical Hunt, their physical strength and speed, and adds it onto Bond himself. And Bond also has a very cool and unique ability called Zero Sign, where he suppresses his presence so much that he can be undetected by multiple people, making it so he's not there. This is how he was able to sneak back in through the 10 Commandments, the strongest characters up until that point in the story, to try and rescue Meliodas, and even managed to kill one of them, Melascula, in an instant. Bond, after training in Purgatory, also essentially evolved his main ability, Snatch, to instead not only take things, but he could also gift part of his own power and stamina to other people, which he used to basically mess with the Demon King's reversal type ability, which reversed magical attacks, making healing damage and legitimate physical damage from magic into healing. So this allowed Bond to heal his allies, as well as, in relation with Snatch, take from his allies as well. So in theory, he could take energy from his opponents, and he could use gift to distribute it amongst his allies. Bond's main weapon outside of hand-to-hand combat is essentially a 3-section staff. He's usually used a plain regular metal staff, imbuing it with his own magical power and Snatch, to be used with multiple different attacks that he has used in his arsenal. But right now, he now has his main weapon, his sacred treasure. I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. Korexos, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, which is also a 3-section staff, and it is a sacred treasure. Sacred treasures in the 7 Deadly Sins verse are very powerful mystical weapons that take the user's vast amount of magical energy from within them and allows them to access a large majority of it. King likes it to how a magic user uses only a small bit from a lake, but with a sacred treasure they can essentially use the whole lake, the whole reservoir, in utilizing their power. The baseline abilities of Koresheth is essentially allowing to increase Bond's physical strength, but also his concentration, which allows him to really keenly focus on his aspects of what he's doing and use his powers to the highest degree. How he used this was in 7 Deadly Sins. He used this to boost his mental capacity and allowed him to extend his reach with Snatch and Vanish and Kill with his staff in order to take out a bunch of baby Enduras from hundreds of kilometers. Not meters, kilometers. Bond has an insane range with his sacred treasure as is. And what makes it impressive is that he was also able, with this super concentration, to identify all of the baby Enduras and wipe out all of them, save for one that was just out of his range. But that in and of itself is already incredibly impressive. Now let's go on to Bond's general statistics, which his attack potency around the time at the end of the series, post-Purgatory, is calculated to be around large country level, if not higher, with the utilization of Snatch, stacking his stats with stealing other people's overall abilities. Durability is calculated to be around the same, if not greater, as due to Bond, while he was immortal, being stuck in Purgatory for hundreds if not thousands of years, he was able to not only take and revive damage from multiple different sources like lava, acid, intense heat, intense cold, every form of natural disaster or intense weather condition that could possibly kill someone. Bond's immortality allowed him to not only heal from all that, but also adapt to the point where he could breathe and remain in Purgatory without any damages, as if it were just being a regular sunny day with fresh air. And these stay even though he lost his immortality towards the end of the Demon King arc, as now, even without his immortality, he was able to swing with a Demon King possessed Meliodas, who was already calculated to be at least country level, if not large country level at that point, at minimum. Obviously, Bond wasn't able to take him on by himself, but being able to not only go toe-to-toe with him for a couple of minutes without taking any real significant damage, but also being able to withstand a good chunk of his darkness and own attacks, proves just how durable Bond himself is. Most slashing attacks cannot work against him unless there is enough magical power and force to actually pierce him. And in terms of his stamina, it is calculated to be presumably almost infinite, as due to the severe circumstances of Purgatory, Bond being able to not only survive that, post all of that extraneous material to be absolutely fine afterwards, but coming back to the real world, his stamina must be immense. Because as of this moment, he has not really faced anybody to truly challenge him, to the point of exhaustion. Lastly, let's look at his speed, and as of right now, it's calculated to be around faster than light, as 7 Deadly Sins characters are all incredibly fast. At bare minimum, right now, Bond is faster than light, and with Snatch being able to take physical strength and speed, he can be faster than light plus, if not beyond that, depending on the opponent he steals his capabilities from. Ban is also potentially an actual genius in combat, as he is able to quickly adapt to any situation that is presented to him and able to analyze the abilities of his opponents with given enough time as he fights them, as well as being given adequate information ahead of time or in the heat of battle. And staying true to his bandit roots, Ban is also incredibly gifted at figuring out what people want to keep hidden or what they view most, which is how he's been able to steal multiple things of value, whether it be just something that he could sell or something valuable to his opponents or enemies that can be used against them. And that's essentially what's going to do it for Ban. Now, when we stack these two characters on their own in base without utilizing any of their main abilities, Ban does take this fairly easily. Not only is he faster than Sukuna, but he has a stronger attack potency and durability, and presumably has near infinite amounts of stamina in battle. Even though Sukuna does have very impressive stamina and attack potency and durability, Ban just outscales him by a very large degree. Now, when we add in their techniques, this makes the fight a lot more interesting, because Sukuna can use Cleave and Dismantle, primarily dismantle at a distance towards Ban, but that won't really do too much. Same with Cleave. Now, what many people kind of get wrong, as it is very easy to get this mixed up, is thinking that Cleave and Dismantle, primarily Cleave, and even Sukuna's Domain, has durability negation, when that's not really true. What Sukuna does is that he applies the right amount of curse energy from himself into his attack in order for him to actually properly cut his opponents. The very obvious thing is when he tried to fight Yuji when he was possessing Megumi's body for the first time. His cursed output was being monitored and limited by Megumi subconsciously, allowing Yuji to take a bunch of different attacks from Sukuna's Cleave and Dismantle, making them more or less shallow cuts, allowing Yuji to actually fight Sukuna one-on-one. So it all comes down to the amount of cursed energy placed into Sukuna's attacks. And if we can measure Sukuna's attacks based off of, let's say, his domain, which is essentially supposed to be the epitome of his cursed technique at that point, he is a city-level opponent, being able to cut things very clearly. However, Ban, and most recently in the manga, even though he is essentially a country-level opponent, Ban was actually, in a recent chapter of Fortnite's The Apocalypse, lowered to 1/10 of his overall strength and took a hit from somebody that was able to cleave through actual stone and earth with no effort, utilizing incredibly fast wind slash attacks that regular people could essentially take out, and this can be presumed to be around a town to city level attack, as it is basically a giant hurricane monster that Ban not only tanks, but is unaffected by and breezes right through in an instant, at 1/10 of his overall power. Now, we could presume that Sukuna is around that strength, if not more so than the person he fought. Even still, Ban at only 1/10 of his strength was able to tank attacks like that cleaved through the actual Earth's crust, and not be injured whatsoever. Even if Sukuna used his domain, it would potentially leave marks on Ban, but it wouldn't be deep enough, as due to his vast amounts of magic power, if we use verticalization to make magic and cursed energy about the exact same thing, Ban would be able to tank it, as at this point he would most likely have too much power for Sukuna to properly gauge and apply to Ban. If anything, he would be able to damage Ban at minimum, but not enough to cut off an arm or deal any lasting true damage, even with continuous attacks through his domain. And even if Sukuna continuously attacking him with his domain was actually starting to slowly chip away at Ban's own durability, Ban is fast enough to not only pick up on Sukuna's technique, but also find out the weakness of his domain, and being able to either closely and instantly take out and knock out Sukuna in an instant, but he could also use his snatch attack or fox hunt to essentially take out the shrine. And Ban could just use it as a guess. With his battle experience, he has sharp instincts, so he'd be able to tell if this one giant shrine that ends up manifesting out of nowhere underneath or behind this person he's fighting, and he then is bombarded with a bunch of slash attacks, he would obviously surmise that that shrine is the cause of it. So he will most likely try to destroy the shrine instantly. Sukuna's fire arrow could do something, but Ban has sustained the severe weather conditions of Purgatory, and we can honestly surmise that Sukuna's fire arrow probably is not as tough as everything that Ban had to go through. He had adapted to so much that he is essentially unburnable at this point. What really puts Sukuna a bit more in favor is his 10 Shadows technique that he got from Megami and his space cutting slash, which do have their drawbacks. Now, Ban can in fact tangle with the 10 Shadows, that is no question whatsoever. Even with, let's say, Rapid Escape that Sukuna can use for cover, Ban can instantly wipe it all out in an instant thanks to his Sacred Treasure and Super Concentration alongside Fox Hunt, as he was able to take out thousands of Enduras, a combination of Snatch, Super Concentration, and his Sacred Treasure, and wipe them out in practically an instant. And that was over hundreds of kilometers, which is vastly greater than Sukuna's 200-meter domain expansion. Now, what Ban could also do to get out of Sukuna's domain if he couldn't fully figure out in that instance that the shrine is the center of his domain, he could quickly get out of the range of the domain and then go into Super Concentration to try and snipe Sukuna from a distance. Heck, Ban could even go Zero Sign and just make it so once he's hidden, Sukuna won't be able to find him once he exits the domain and comes back in, or he can just make himself basically invisible with that once Sukuna takes out his domain and closes it off, and Ban can go quickly in and just assassinate Sukuna. The main things that do go in Sukuna's favor, as I have to say, are his Akito, his Merged Beast, Maharaga, and Tranquil Deer. These three things will in fact do keep Sukuna in the fight, even Sukuna's own Reverse Curse technique. As we have seen, Sukuna can use Reverse Curse technique to heal himself from very lasting damage, as well as lost limbs. So, if Ban does take away a limb in order to hamper Sukuna's abilities, he can just use Reverse Curse technique or summon Tranquil Deer to heal himself. Akito does the exact same thing, and Maharaga is highly adaptable, so that does provide Ban a bit of a challenge. However, Ban could also just end up using his Fox Hunt or Physical Hunt to dampen or at least take at bare minimum half of Akito, Maharaga, and Sukuna's base strength and abilities, or magical or cursed abilities, and add it on to himself, making him not only faster, even faster than Light Plus at that point, but also making his attack potency higher than Large Country level. Make it easy for him with Fox Hunt or different utilizations of his abilities alongside his Sacred Treasure to wipe out Maharaga and Akito fairly quickly, and all Ban really has to do is completely dismantle and destroy Sukuna. Heck, best case scenario, Ban can quickly just either remove Sukuna's heart, realizing that taking away Sukuna's heart won't really do anything towards it, similar to how it didn't really kill Sukuna when he took it out when he was possessing Yuji, but once he figures that out, he could just take out multiple of his internal organs with ease without Sukuna really noticing. He can even take out his brain, and as we all know, with Curse Technique, it's all in the brain and how they utilize their Curse Techniques. Even Reverse Curse Technique or his inane domain and innate technique are all utilized with a certain section of the brain. And that's how a lot of Curse Sorcerers end up being, as their brain is a key factor in utilizing any of their abilities. Get rid of the brain, it's GG's. And before anyone comes to say that Sukuna would still survive, as he is more or less considered like a cursed object, as when he was turned into cursed fingers, they weren't able to be destroyed, need to remind you that the reason Yuji was supposed to eat the fingers was that once Sukuna was incarnated, he would be able to get killed and exorcised like he wasn't able to before. That is the main point of JJK, and I know I shouldn't have to explain this, but it is very likely that there will be people in the comments saying that Ban wouldn't be able to kill Sukuna no matter what. Now lastly, Sukuna's main technique that can in fact kill Ban is his Space Distorting Slash. That thing cuts space itself, and there's no way that Ban himself can survive an attack like that. However, Sukuna does have a drawback to that in the fact that he has to chant for it. Now, we all know that when this was revealed, we basically just got to a cut when Gojo was slashed by this attack, and not how Sukuna managed to chant in that instance. I still have no idea, and that's probably just Gege being a dick. But as we see in Sukuna's fight against Kashimo, he had to chant to utilize this ability. So even if Sukuna starts to charge up this attack and uses Akito and Maharaga or even Rapid Escape, Ban is vastly faster than Sukuna, so he would be able to speed blitz him and stop his incantation before he could use his Dimension Slash. And even if Sukuna does try to use this Dimension Slash, it was very clear with how Kashima was facing it that he was actually able to sense or see the slash attack. So Ban could react fast enough to dodge it, and thus seeing the damage this slash attack could do, instantly tries to speed blitz Sukuna. So at the end of the day, Ban severely outclasses Sukuna in almost every category. Strength, speed, durability, and his own techniques are a very hard counter to a lot of Sukunas. And even if at the end of the day you could argue that Sukuna's cleave can cut through Ban, all Ban has to do is use physical hunt or hunter fest to take half of Sukuna's cursed energy at minimum at this point, and I believe that's as much at minimum that Ban can actually put into his body. He could probably take more, and add it on to himself, making him faster, stronger, and more magically dense than Sukuna's own cursed technique, making Sukuna's cursed energy not as dense or potent or not enough that Sukuna would need to actually properly damage Ban. And everything that I've just mentioned, Ban is faster, stronger, more durable than Sukuna instead. And with the distortion slash, all Ban has to do is either notice that something's up with Sukuna having to chance something, or being able to manage to dodge this space-time slash. Ban is incredibly keen and has very sharp instincts and superhuman senses, so it's very obvious that he would most likely be able to find this out and be able to suss out if something was up. The thing I left out by accident, I mind you, because people are going to mention this, this was literally towards the end of the recording that I realized this, I did not mention Sukuna's Curse Tool, and that was my bad. But Sukuna's Curse Tool isn't really anything all too special. The technique inside his Curse Tool is really just strong lightning attacks. And Ban can withstand that as well. If he can withstand acid and lava and flames almost as hot as the sun in literal hell purgatory, he could survive a lightning bolt. Like he survived a literal divine ray of light from a deity. Look, at the end of the day, even with all the scaling I presented in reasoning, Ban squared up against two literal gods in 7 deadly sins, the Supreme Deity and the Demon King. And if you think that Sukuna could still beat Ban after taking on two literal deities, then you're kind of tripping. Now, I have given Sukuna the benefit of the doubt with specific situations around his curse techniques that could give him the edge in the fight. And if Sukuna is smart, and he is smart, he could deal damage to Ban. But Ban is just that much faster, durable, and stronger, and has a lot of battle experience and sharp instincts that he would get the dub over on Sukuna. JJK characters are not as strong as people do in fact think. Yes, they have very broken abilities. Sukuna is way up there alongside with Gojo, obviously with incredibly broken and hacks abilities. But overall, speed, strength, durability, it is not as strong as a lot of anime verses. 7 Deadly Sins is much higher than it at this point in the series, especially since they had to deal with literal deities. So at the end of the day, Sukuna and Ban was a foregone conclusion, but I did want to give you as much detail on these two characters as well, and how a potential matchup could end up going for the two of them. I wanted to give Sukuna some actual outs and reasonings to how he could potentially beat Ban or deal some real good damage to him. But at the end of the day, Ban takes the win, and Sukuna gets completely destroyed. This matchup was not even close from the beginning, but I did want to give some fair shots to Sukuna as I do love the guy. But that's it for this. How did you guys feel about my very first Versus video? Did I do a good job? Did I leave some stuff out involving either of these characters? Are there any characters you'd like me to do versus battles with, whether they be from 7 Deadly Sins or even JJK or some other verses? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. I have no idea if these versus videos, if I continue to do them, will be as long as this one. They could be longer for all I know, but let's hope for my editor's sake, it is not as long.